fit in there.
Right, but it's going to be more than we plug. Because
I didn't have a chance to go home.
You want to put my jacket on, bro?
I'd rather wear the mayor's jacket.
Just the facilities only.
I didn't get a chance to go home.
Facilities cost. The 175, that's just facilities. This is the true total cost.
Minus the 4120, you are
What's the
correct.
difference? What's the?
I got 1 minute.
The rest of it?
This is the P&L right here. It's the FTEs, it's the AE staffing, which is the big component.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yep.
So this part of it, the full time.
So our number will actually be higher. But if we've already eliminated AE staffing, we don't count that twice.
Yeah.
So what is it, 170?
I'll be good.
174, well, for parks facilities is
It'll be 2 minutes
174 minus the 32,
sir.
so 140,
140.
yeah, 140. We're good?
Gentlemen, that's a hot mic.
Sir?
Steve, that's a hot mic. It is now 1800 hours. I'm going to call this workshop to order. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Deputy Mayor Jaffe.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hoorah. Roll call, Madam Jones.
Mayor Medina.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Jaffe.
Present.
Councilman Johnson.
Present.
Councilman Hammer.
Present.
Councilman Langevin.
Present.
Mr. Morton.
Present.
Ms. Smith. Present.
Okay, business item number 1, discussion of our fiscal year 2026-2027 budget. Mr. Morton, take it away.
Good evening. Tonight we have our FY27 proposed budget. Before we get started, we do want to highlight our GFOA Budget Award. For the 35th year, the city has received this award. It is a distinction, recognition in governmental budgeting with a requirement of meeting proficiency in 14 different judging criteria. It's also our 3rd time for receiving special recognition for our performance measures. So it is something that we pride ourselves on. This was for last year's budget, and we hope to achieve the same thing with this year's.
Thank you.
For tonight, this is our agenda. The city manager has a presentation in regards to the FY27 proposed budget. And then we are going to take you through the proposed budget from the FY26 accomplishments we were able to achieve, the overall big picture of all of the financials, and then down to a department level so that you get a true snapshot of where all the impacts are. We'll wrap it up with our taxable values and millage rates, and then we'll open it up for any questions.
Delay. All right. Good evening, thank you. You know, when we talk about budgets, you know, budgets are more than just numbers, and in some regards, it's a true statement of your priorities and your intentions. Some people wax a little more poetic and say it's a love letter to your community, because everything in our budget is telling our community what we value. This year, obviously, we've got some challenges, and we definitely tried to meet those challenges. So a couple things I want to put in perspective. So it's the first time we've had a true balanced budget. And so not only is it balanced, I'm calling it balanced plus, because we right now have about 640,000. I think that number might be a little bigger, closer to $1 million, but we have about 640,000 in undesignated revenue at this point, but I want to talk to you about that and why I think that's important and critical. Again, our revenues are greater than our expenditures, which was one of the missions we were asked to do. Overall, it's about an 18.3% reduction from the fiscal 26 budget. We did build it on the rollback as directed. We had the alternate, budget built at the 5.5, but got direction for rollback. Fundamentally, the budget is priority focused, and it goes back to the question that we keep asking ourselves as staff is, what does the community expect? What are the demands? And then differentiating between what we should be doing and what we could be doing. We really need to focus on what we should be doing, our obligations, our goals, our priorities, and how we connect resources, services to the community. So it is priority focused, and it is built around the tenets of DOGE, and those tenets are transparency, fiscal accountability, and customer service. And so I will get into how we built this budget around DOGE this year. So what's not included? That's just as important to talk about a budget being balanced to revenues, but in that there are some things that are not included initially in the funding. And one of those are no new general fund projects, none whatsoever. There are no new general fund fleet purchases, other than the ongoing obligations we have for some fire engines that we bought last year in a 3-year roll-up fiscal strategy. There's no new police cars being purchased, there's no new fire equipment, rolling stock. Anything that has to do with general fund is not budgeted or allocated this year. It does contemplate a temporary pool closure, at least for a year, to reevaluate that strategy and alternate funding. The reason being is we know we have about and it's a guess right now, we haven't bid it, but the latest estimate is about a $1.7 million capital requirement that's gonna come any year, could be this year, could be next. And our annual operating costs around the pool are somewhere around $769,000. So it's one of those operations, as we try to look at, again, what do we need to be doing? Again, when I'm not funding fleet and some other things, what are we doing? And it does contemplate the elimination of the AUE staffing. That would affect the aquatic facility in either regard. Their component of AUE temporary staffing appears to be around $424,000, and then the balance of that is used in our rec divisions, some of it for summer camp, some of it for programming. So we would need to increase our partnership strength with this year. I think was the first time the YMCA really stepped up and ran a lot of the summer camps. We have to be looking to those partnerships, both public and private operators of camps. A lot of groups operate summer camps. And, spread that word that there are summer camp opportunities aside from what we're going to be doing with the YMCA in that partnership. And when I talk about the 3 pillars of DOGE, right, DOGE said, here's some core things that if you're not aligning right, and I think another way they said it is if the newspaper came to your town and put a headline and said, City of Palm Bay is spending money on these things, how would the community react to that? What's the litmus test for publication? And so in that, we have a bunch of projects that are aimed at that DOGE initiative. One of them is communications. We need to be externally focused. DOGE commands you to be solely focused on external communications in terms of paid employees. So we do have a proposed unfunding of 2 current communications positions that reside in the city manager's office. Also recalibrating our wellness program to be more accessible, but not being a direct general fund expense to the taxpayer for wellness, and reabsorbing some of those duties that are on the other side of wellness, like drug testing and other compliance issues. We'd figure out how to recalibrate those through HR. On the transparency and customer service side, we have Alicia, which is back in almost 7 months ago, we had a conversation regarding continued customer concerns and complaints about the inefficiency of our phone system and inability to get answers quickly. People still spending too much time on hold, and so this system is in the beta phase testing. I may get corrected by IT. I think I'm using the right technical term. But either way, it's supposed to launch about November. And so far, in very early testing, it still has a lot of errors. But it's designed to connect people quicker to the people they actually want to talk with. So it's looking promising. Again, transparency, customer service. In terms of the project dashboard we keep talking about, I understand that that'll be released sometime in September at a yet-to-be-scheduled Public Works open house, which is that total project dashboard for residents to look where every capital project is being worked on, completed, budget, timelines, status, all those wonderful things. So it'll sort of open up that communication of where your project money is going and a whole host of projects across the city. So that was an important transparency and customer service initiative that we've maintained in the budget. Back to the tenets of DOGE. We've unfunded right about 30 positions across the organization at this point in time. And we were, again, mostly successful through the soft and hard freeze, but there are some that are proposed to be unfunded that are currently filled. But again, back to DOGE and back to trying to balance a budget and reprioritize what we're asked to do every day. And of course, this next year's budget proposes no new FTEs whatsoever. But what is included? So we're still strategically, even in constraint, trying to move things forward in initiatives that I think are wise and I think council initially had agreed. So we're proposing to add another $600,000 to the fleet reserve, which will bring that total to about $1.5 million. Why is that important? Fleet reserve is like a sinking, almost like a self-insurance fund. And if we were to, invariably, we've been doing very well. I think the last 6-7 months where I don't believe we've had any mishaps with patrol vehicles, which is fantastic. Part of that is a lot of internal focus in the PD on driver behavior, driver safety, and attentiveness. Sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it, but we haven't had any incidents. But if we do, we total a police car, we've got a fund to go replace the police car, not wait 10 or 11 months for the insurance to reconcile or whatever that process may be. As you recall, real recently, we had a boom truck go in for an annual inspection, and turned out that the lift mechanism that would send people up into the air had a significant structural compromise crack in the frame, and it was completely unsafe for use. We need that truck to maintain our signals. That was about a $300,000 piece of equipment. So we're building in some latitude that every emergency doesn't create a crisis, and every emergency or unforeseen challenge doesn't demand us to come back and say, what project are we gonna not do? What service are we not gonna deliver? Or where are we gonna try to find the money to fix that problem? So it's insuring ourselves. We're carrying forward the $1 million in public safety that we had put for property acquisition. Here's the reality. We know we're gonna need a new police station within 5 years. We need to start having those conversations. I'd love it. I think the chief would love it if we could figure out how to keep it on this campus. We may not be able to. Even if we can't, we may need to acquire land for fire stations if we can't get it through a development exchange. Let's say we can accomplish both those. We also know we've got a temporary Station 9 sitting on leased property. It's going to have to be moved. So this is that self-insurance fund, if nothing else, to make sure if that trigger gets pulled and we've got to relocate Temp Station 9 to a new home, we know we have the resources and capability to move that fire station, maintain fire service in that corridor without a significant disruption. So I thought it was a priority to leave that alone. We have the same amount going into road maintenance this year. We're still not hitting that $4 million annual target that I think council expressed as a priority. I think we have some strategies maybe to get there this year, but we're programming it at $3.25 million. Now, there's some things that may break in the budget. Have to be candid, right? I keep using this analogy. We went into the steam train, an old coal-fire steam train, and we threw a bucket of water on the coal, and we're still rolling. And so some of these decisions that we are proposing to make, I'm going to tell you now, are not going to work. We're going to have some challenges we're going to have to navigate through the year. We might have adjustments. Part of it is it was a large exercise to reduce the budget in a year where we also saw our fixed costs go way beyond our revenues, right? But also, historically, the city has not maintained key performance measures or level of service indicators, and that has been a priority. We've directed and worked with staff. We're talking about again tomorrow. What are your core key performance indicators, your LOS strategy delivery services for next year? We should be prioritizing operations and expenses to that. So my point is, I can't tell you if a maintenance position I unfunded, we're going to find out in 6 months, hey, wait a minute, we really needed that position. Can we move something in the organization, or do I need to ask you, hey, we got to refill that vacant position because we can't deliver a required or a demanded or expected level of service. Additionally, we've imposed some overtime constraints fiscally because we have, and I'll talk about that later, but we are going to do a deep dive, and I'm calling it an audit on our overtime practices, specifically in public safety, but across the organization. So until then, having some of that reserve to fund true emergencies or actual overtime needs that can be validated, we need to maintain that. An example would just be we're structurally unprepared for call service. We could have a call service spike. I just saw some crime reports, and kudos to the PD. Crime is down in all kinds of categories again. A lot of great hard work and diligence. We should be grateful. That's not a fluke that happens, especially in a growing community, to see those numbers go down. But we also, the last time we had a homicide, I think we had 100, 200 hours of overtime, right? Because you're on scene, they're on scene 24/7, they're doing things. So we need to also be prepared to realize there might be emergencies beyond our control. We have a hurricane. And then what I'm proposing to do is that 640 we talked about, and it may be a little more, I'd love to leave that from the balanced budget in a personnel contingency. And the reason is for those things I stated. If we defund the position that we said, hey, we need more allocation, we have an overtime emergency that can be validated and verified, we've got a source to go to without wondering again what project we're going to cut, what service we're not going to deliver, or where we're going to try to find the money. So we're self-insuring through this transition is really the key of what I'm trying to do, to make sure we have adequate resources to make adjustments as we try to navigate from a paper document that may look good. Now we have to execute that in the real world, and what are the practical implications and the unknowns of that. Again, given this environment where we just got our first level of service analysis officially back, one of the big ones we commissioned from the police. I think I've shared the draft with you. I've had a chance to read it. We're going to work on those types of analyses across many city operations to understand truly what we need and how we budget time and personnel most efficiently. So again, back to successes really quick. And again, this becomes important. So traditionally what would have happened is any savings would have been rolled into the budget, and we would have gone forward and not addressed that, hey, we're rolling money forward to fill budget gaps. So we are gonna have somewhere, because of the measures we took this year, we're gonna have somewhere between $5 and $7 million in one-time personnel savings. That number will not be final, probably until mid-year of the next fiscal year, when the budget is completed, everything is audited, all accounts are in, the ACFR is done, and we know for a fact, but I think this is a good guess. I expect to have somewhere between $2 and $3 million of unspent budget savings, again, that we haven't rolled forward, we haven't rolled up, we haven't found alternative uses. We've said manage to the budget, not the other way around. Don't manage to the numbers, manage to the operation. And we have an opportunity, potentially, one time, and it comes up about every 5 to 8 years. Councilman Johnson, you may have been here the last time this happened. It happens at cities all the time. But we hold our employee health insurance reserves for payment of claims to a certain actuarial number plus a reserve. And when you start to exceed that reserve exponentially, you do have the opportunity to go back and say, okay, city, over the arc of time, through the conservative actuarial numbers, we've collected more and had less claims, or interest has been better. And so we may have a chance to grab between $4 and $5 million one time back to the general fund this next year. Another success that we had was a reversed approximately an annual ongoing $1.5 to $2 million deficit in garbage. Now we still have to account for those 3 FTEs that were being paid out of a different fund. Kevin and his team are going through and going to be working on an internal, I'm going to call it an audit/analysis of stormwater, making sure employees are portioned properly. And here's an idea of what would happen. Years ago, I'd be an employee working in the stormwater department. Mr. Hammer may be able to validate this. And I'm gonna say, you know what? I really want to go work on roads. Something about roads really excites me. I want to be working with asphalt and building roads and doing stuff. You go to your boss, you get the transfer, but no one ever thought on the back end, you also got to move the salary to roads. Now, you shouldn't still be paying that employee out of stormwater. So we know those kinds of things are going on. We've been finding them, we've been fixing them. That's one of those things I can't tell you full adjustments yet. We're still digging through. It's been an ongoing process, department by department, division by division. We've definitely renegotiated every contract that's come up, with exception of the Evans Center and the Senior Center, because of the service they provide, to be very advantageous to the city in the current and long term. Some contracts have seen, 10, 20x in revenue increase over the term, which is great. Those things keep adding to our capability, and it's the fiscal stewardship the community deserves. We did save, it's been adding up this whole time, but probably $1.7 million in utility from the negotiations with Wade Trim, a bill that's never going to come due to the city, which is fantastic. Again, at least on that savings number, we need to verify it. So I just want to kind of keep that in your hat, because I still want to talk about that here in a minute. So potentially, it could be lower. Won't be higher, but it could be lower. We could come in at 6 total, right? So a guess. So I'm going to give you an example of what I would suggest we consider, and we're going to have many months to consider this. Well, let's say we get to mid-year and we have $4 million that we say, yep, absolutely, this is a savings. I believe it'll be double that, but let's just say it's $4 million. I would suggest you consider 50% into current fleet and then fleet reserve. What that allows us to do is make some capital fleet purchases that we know we're going to need by mid-year, especially in police, especially in public works, especially in facilities, to keep our fleet right ahead of that repair and depreciation curve. So it's identified purchases we know we need to make. We'll have some cash. I would like to invest in some fleet purchases. I'd suggest also putting some in road maintenance. We never seem to have enough road maintenance. We know the value of early road maintenance is significant. So adding an extra $1 million, or whatever that 25% would be in a road maintenance, is going to pay itself in time and dividends. I'd ask you to put 20% into maintenance projects, about $800,000. I can explain to you why that's important, I think. And then 5% into maintenance reserve. And the reason the reserve, back to like fleet sinking, if the AC chiller is to go out on this facility tomorrow, or the one on City Hall, and it's a $50,000 repair, again, last year or this year, as the budget's designed so far, I would have to figure out what service we're not going to deliver, what employer we're going to delay a hiring in a position, what project we're going to cancel to take care of repairs. We need, like everyone else does, to start building, in my opinion, a savings account to take care of those issues. Big unknowns moving forward, right? We don't know the tax climate. We're not talking about it a whole lot, but my gut is telling me things are going to get tighter regardless, not better. We're going to continue to stretch into economic development. We're going to continue to look at different partnerships, but on the whole, we've got systemic structural infrastructure issues, road maintenance issues, Malabar, right? We could spend savings on one road project, so we need to keep that fiscal stewardship, that fiscal accountability, And we need to be thinking future years, not, hey, we can make something work for another year. How are we getting to that 5-year, 6-year, 7-year goal, and how are we funding it? What's our true CIP? What's our true need? I want to talk to you real quick about building ARP interest. Just to throw it out tonight, I know it gets beat around a lot, and I wondered if I should bring it up, but is that the best use of money? Because I'm going to show you why. Maybe it is. And then the bridge, same thing. Do we want to really do a bridge? Do we want to start talking about a roundabout or a traffic signal with a second exit, something that meets the same traffic flow goal? I don't know. But with some of the hits we're trying to take in the park impact fee, between that and the bridge, we would wipe the fund out. So we want to be careful about, strategic about the value we're going to get. And here's why I talk about deferred maintenance and capital, refunding it mid-year and maybe even considering shifting that ARP interest. We have about $3.9 million deficit, and I had a different handout that isn't here. But if you look at some of the hard deferred maintenance, it's probably about the $2 million range. I give you quick examples. We had an AC replacement at the captain's house. We've known this for several years. It's gonna go out anytime. We just know it. We've got some hurricane screen maintenance we need to do for $20,000. We've got parks restroom safety upgrades. We've got actual functional upgrades at a playground. We've got roof rehab and replacement. We've got things to do at the community centers. We've got, right? And so we've got this deferred maintenance that we're not gonna get away from. We've got some must-go light repairs for $60,000. At some point, these things break. We know their identified needs, and we need to talk about how are we starting to prioritize, and that's, council can help with that exercise, but actual required renovations, roofing, sealing of buildings, things that are gonna matter long-term. And as we delay, we saw that sheet last year with the red zone, and most of our facilities are 80% out of that spec of maintenance compliance. Those costs don't go away, they just continue to grow, right? So it's prioritizing some of that maintenance and saying, hey, we've got some real priorities that we need to address to keep things moving. So it goes back to that use of some of those funds for maintenance reserve, and the discussion later on about ARP interest. We don't have to have that discussion tonight, but that's something we can definitely talk about. But we can't stop. Like, I'm real excited that we're having these frank conversations. We're in the mix. We're really looking through our budget, but everything tells us we got to keep going. And I had originally planned on delaying the top item, and actually got in a conversation. Deputy Mayor, do you want to speak to this item real quick?
Yeah, so earlier this year, I guess it was around the SRO conversations that we were having on this dais, and what that was going to look like if we were going to, go back with that interlocal agreement with Brevard County Schools. And I was having a lot of conversations with Sheriff Wayne Ivey at the time, and on one of those phone calls, he had asked me, he's like, hey, why don't you guys partner with us? Why don't you allow us to handle your 911 calls? And so I had brought that conversation back to City Manager Morton, and at that time, there wasn't an appetite for it, but I asked him if he was still just, willing to explore some high-level conversations and, what that would look like. And there is a huge opportunity to save money, and the Sheriff's Department would be open to interviewing the comms folks that work for Palm Bay and bringing them on, through an interview process and hiring them with the Brevard County Sheriff's Department. They're at a situation like just a couple of weeks ago where, I had called 911 where I witnessed a power line go down and it caused a fire in somebody's front yard. So I called 911, our dispatch answered, going through the questions, and I said, well, there's a fire. And they're like, please hold, we have to transfer you to Brevard County to route. So I thought there was some inefficiencies there. Whether that behind the scenes, is there an efficiency? I don't think so, but on the surface level, it seemed weird to make one phone call just to be routed to another phone call. And then, a month ago when the situation in Driscoll Heights, or 2 months ago, there was a fire, one of the residents down there calls 911, they get bounced around between Melbourne, Palm Bay, and then ultimately the county to dispatch, safety to that community. So, my vision of what the savings that we have would be just reinvest that money right back into the police department for personnel, for police officers that patrol our streets. So if I missed anything, Mr. Morton, please add to it.
Oh, no, I was going to kick it off, and that got sort of prompted. I think I've actually sent you all the draft agreement. You've had a chance to look at it, and I didn't expect the response. We've been working with the chief. We haven't talked really all through this yet, but it looks like this is with council's leading, which I believe we sort of got, is one of these issues we need to press in everything we can, right? Efficiency mergers, I still think there's great efficiency that can be had with merging parks and facilities with public works. I'm not talking about reducing giant numbers of personnel, but I think every day, the way we share equipment, we share trucks, we share work skills, we share knowledge, we share different aspects of the job will just make us better. I mean, I've had a conversation with Greg recently where he's falling behind in park maintenance. He wanted to reassign some other maintenance folks. Wouldn't it be great just to say, hey, here's a maintenance enterprise between public works and parks, we can, right, put together 10 guys, 50, whatever it is, and go knock this project out and just get better with that equipment sharing, truck sharing, labor sharing, accountability, something that I'm definitely wanting to look into this year. And you've also heard me talk about the finance and procurement centralization. I think over the years, we've sort of had an outworking of, people sort of duplicating some functions, either whether it was for efficiency, whether it felt like it added some control, saved some time. We really need to look at how do we re-centralize some of those functions to be the most efficient. Back to Doge, what are we doing? How are we layering services and how are we providing them efficiently? We should be having the conversation around the medics, the EMS and the transport. On the medics, we do have our ambulance provider, our EMS provider as Brevard County, but I will tell you that our men and women carry a huge part of that load every single day. And the term is used package for transport. And we're getting there, we're stabilizing, we're often there way in advance of anybody, taking care of the patient, saving lives, administering drugs, doing all those things. And then, Brevard County ambulance shows up to transport. I think we need to have more conversations around what those cost centers are and the cost it incurs on us to make sure every single fire personnel is EMS trained and gets to go to school, and we're bearing a cost I think that we should be having a conversation with the county with around that and maybe reignite this transport conversation. Again, we're driving into KPIs and level of service until we really know that and can tell you what something costs, why we're doing it, and how it matters, right? Some of this has gut instinct and it's just experience over time. And again, some of them are going to be calls that we think look really good, I think look really good right now, and they may not work out real well. So we've got to be mindful to be able to be nimble and adjust as we move through this budget year with a lot of structural changes. We need to continue fiscal discipline. That's a given. We'll continue to do that. We're not going to use unfunded bar savings, right? We're going to make people manage to the numbers, not the other way around. We need to what we call slow hiring to net zero. Great example. Let's say mayor works for me and he gets paid $100 a year, and he left in Q1, and we paid him $25. In Q2, we had to pay out all his benefits. That's $50. Got to have that delay in hiring until your budget catches up to what the new person's going to cost. You can't bring somebody in that may cost the city 80 grand to onboard and get everything done if there's only $50,000 in the line item. So we're going to call it slow to net zero hiring. We're going to have to eventually, I think at some point, have the conversation around the fire district as a concept for the city, a taxing district. The reason being, our fire department deserves a predictable, stable, reliable revenue source to do the mission we've asked them to do. And right now, we are not giving them that. And so we need to recognize the real costs and let the community understand that and let them and you guys tell us to go in the right direction. But again, I think we deserve reliable, stable, predictable funding source so they know they have the resources, the tools, and equipment to do the job safely. And we're not allowed to do that for police, so that does help also make sure we're creating the same envelope for our police department, right? I like the idea of, I've heard from several of you, reinvesting that comm money right back into badges and boots, which is, I think, super important for a growing city. I want to have the conversation about making planning an enterprise fund, just like building, just like a lot of other things, although exclude residents. And what I mean by that is, if you're a homeowner and you're coming for your $50 fence permit, it should be a $50 fence permit. You're already paying taxes in the community. But some services we do, you'll pay us a fraction of a cost for work that may cost us tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. We should have those conversations around, do we want to have a cost recovery model? What would that look like? And the reason I talk about it is planning as an enterprise, we brought in $400,000 in revenue approximately this last year for an operations cost of $1.6 million. How do we right-size the work we do every day? If I go to a local engineer or consultant and say, here's my development, I want to work on it, I either get a flat rate that incorporates the expenses or I'm paying an hourly rate. Here it's a flat one-time fee and off you go. And that's, again, a community conversation, a council conversation, but it's something we should look at, right? How do we do it? Do we do another similar model to building where we have different paths to achieving planning compliance? So I think there's a very big conversation that can be had. This was an idea that was thrown out at us at one of the tables from someone who's had experience with it. Gretchen here, our new economic development director, so she threw this one at us. But this idea of creating a culture of stewardship, right? Mayor inspired me, and when Gretchen mentioned something, the light bulb went off, that in the mayor's video, in our recruitment video, he's talking about every nickel, every dollar. It's public trust, it matters. And so, continuing to build this culture where everybody realizes, no matter where you're at in the organization, that we want to be stewards of the taxpayer resources at every single level. No amount is too small, no amount is too big. And by allowing people to call in and say, hey, I have an idea to save $5, $50, $10,000, $500,000, want to make sure that everyone knows it's their responsibility to be part of this culture of fiscal accountability to our community. And I think that's just an important message, that we create that space. We definitely have an audit plan this year, as I mentioned, for public safety, for overtime. We're going to do the audit and the metrics, understand what's happening. The numbers in OT are just completely unsustainable. And I'm having trouble connecting the dots to how those hours add up. So we need to understand that at a very high level. And then anything we find, regardless, usually because it's part of the big three, wages, hours, and working conditions, becomes a subject and a discussion at the bargaining table generally, right? So it's just one of those things that we want to keep in mind and work on. And as I mentioned, there's an ongoing, or just beginning, I think you'll have a presentation in the next month or two for this internal, I'm calling it an audit, but really tracking and understanding where the stormwater dollars are. And again, I think Public Works has made a lot of progress this year on ironing that out. We have some one-time initiatives again, things to be hopeful for this year. We've got several property sales and/or lease proposals coming to you, not purchases, but sales and/or leases of surplus property. You allowed us to engage to realtor services. We've been going through, identifying, and trying to package them in tranches of 4 or 5. We have our first one going through review to make sure we're not unintentionally selling a piece of property that will be critical in the future for right-of-way or stormwater or something. But getting some of these properties off the books, returning them to the tax rolls, letting people do things with them. One of them might be to a local charter school. Another one might be for a single-family house. So it's going to come in all kinds of flavors for you guys to decide if we're moving them on. We're going to continue to try to do the work of showing the true costs and right-sizing. Again, no more budget roll-ups. What does it really cost? How do we track that through a cost center? How do we allocate for every resource? I've given you the example, when we send someone out to do a pothole, I'd love to be able to tell you exactly what it costs on average to repair and patch a pothole. I can't tell you that now. I can't tell you the total material cost, labor time, vehicle, all the costs on an average basis, so you guys can make better educated decisions on the budget, and so can we too from the ops side. And we need to have, in my opinion, the conversation of getting back to a more regular and standard method of stormwater billing. Right now, the ones who aren't paying are the ones who either know how to work that process or do property transfers different ways. And so again, I told you when I first got here, I looked at basically a uncollectible debt of about $500,000 just for one project where a developer didn't pay the stormwater fee. I want to make sure that we have a mechanism to capture those. That impacts entire city's ability to deal with stormwater issues, swale maintenance, all those things that really matter in Florida. So we just need to know that we can collect, and we're assessing and collecting appropriate amounts of money to make sure we're moving our stormwater CIP and program forward. This is you. Shane. I'm going to turn it over to Shane. Thank you.
Alrighty, so starting off this next section, I just want to highlight some of the 2026 accomplishments for the fiscal year. Something to note right off the top is that we had no budget amendments from the fund balance in the general fund. So no non-budgeted needs were addressed by our bar savings. So anything that was requested initially was then analyzed, determined if there was a savings, and then essentially used for other needs that were found in the general fund. There was also $21.6 million in capital investments in FY26 approved budget. So $7.6 million was for utilities, 2.1 for the stormwater utility vehicles and equipment, and then 11.9 in general fund with a focus on public safety. There was $3.25 million committed to the road maintenance CIP fund, 1.25 million commitment to LOGT, 600K committed to emergency fleet replacements, and then 1 million towards land acquisition, including future public safety facilities. So really trying to make use of savings where we can find them and avoiding going to fund balance to meet those gaps that we're identifying. Getting into the section on the financials, this is going to be a breakdown kind of in layers. First, we're going to start with all funds. You're going to see how the city spends its $427.4 million. Then the general fund breakdown. showing the property tax supported operating budget of $135.8 million, which is about 29% of that total. And then we'll get into the enterprise funds, which are primarily supported by those ratepayers. That's going to be your water, sewer, solid waste, stormwater, all of which are funded by those ratepayers and not taxes. And we'll go ahead and flag those as we go through the next section of the presentation. So here's where the money comes from citywide. The largest source to note isn't property tax. It's actually going to be your charges for service, which is roughly $136.6 million, or 40% of that total. That's going to be your water, sewer, solid waste, and stormwater rates. Your property taxes are $80.6 million of that, or roughly 23%. And that includes both the operating levy and the voter-approved road bond fund debt levy. One note on the 28% labeled other, about 38 million of it is transfers between our own funds. So that's not new money arriving from outside. And this 344 million is recurring revenue only. So it excludes any fund balance that we're appropriating for projects that are essentially going forward in the next year. So not a use of fund balance to balance the budget, but just projects that have already existed that are going forward. So now we're going to see the breakdown of the revenue composition. Kind of a big data, heavy and dense table here, but really the focus is going to be on those bottom line totals and the history that you'll see from fiscal year 23 to the FY27 proposed budget. So you'll note that charges for services is that 136.6 million, or roughly 40%. And again, that's those ratepayer-based items. Property taxes are the 80.6 million. So really noting, So noting all this, you'll see that really the big portion is going to be in that portion of charges for services, kind of increasing over that period of time from FY23. So again, just highlighting that not all of the city's revenue is made up of that property tax revenue. So to note property taxes, we're up roughly 4.6%, but just to elaborate, that's a 7% increase in taxable value, not a rate increase itself. So the proposed millage is actually going down based from the current rate of 6.700 to 6.6015. And then two lines that are down that I want to name and call out are the intergovernmental, which is down 20% because the state hasn't published the final shared revenue figures. We built in a 5% reduction, and we'll amend that when they do publish. And impact fees are down 17%, which tracks with new construction value falling 11%. But this just gives you that high-level overview of the total city's revenue composition. So now getting into the spending and expenditure side of things, everything here is grouped by function. You'll note that infrastructure is 47%, and that's primarily utilities and public works, overwhelmingly paid for, again, by your ratepayers, and restricted capital dollars, not property taxes. Public safety is 18% citywide inside the general fund alone, and police and fire are 56% of that. One category I want to explain before it is misread is the administrative and supporting section, which is 12%, or $51 million, but $26 million of that is for your employee health benefits. It's your risk and claims, as highlighted earlier, trying to keep those claims down. And then the actual administrative offices such as council, city manager, procurement, finance, that's $5.8 million, or about 1.5% of the budget. So overall, this is again kind of another breakdown, data dense table here, which really gives you that composition from FY23 to the proposed FY27. Total spending is down roughly 18.3%, or $96 million from last year's amended. Three numbers here do look dramatic, so I'm going to go and break those down. The first is your growth management, which is showing roughly like a 136% increase, and that's not an increase, it's a reclassification of housing grant programs, which is roughly $4.5 million moved from economic development. So again, no new positions. This budget permits no FTE increases anywhere. And then you'll notice kind of an offset there with economic development, which is down a good bit as well, and that almost 90% for that same reason. Plus federal ARPA dollars are fully spent, and we're on that interest side of things now, as kind of mentioned earlier, kind of deciding how to spend the interest that has accrued on those ARPA funds. Public Works is down 31% because the Go Road program shows zero this year. That's just a fund structure change tied to our new ERP system, which is starting October 1st, not a stop to road work. Road funding continues, 3.25 million of that, which is from the general fund, and 1.765 million in gas tax. So with 2 million road maintenance. So that's just kind of showing how some of these numbers have shifted and evolved over time. We've had a handful of structural changes, departmental staffing changes in terms of how those departments are laid out. And then, of course, when you add in the complication of a new ERP, that also adds fun to the mix. So going into debt service, transfers in your non-departmental, this slide is where 18% decreases actually live. Debt service is essentially flat, down roughly 1.7%, and it's fully funded, but transfers drop 45 million or 54%, and that one line is 47% of the entire budget reduction. The reason is the road bond program. Last year, we moved 55 million to that fund, and nothing comparable or comparable recurs this year. So I want to be precise that this is a finance timing roll-off, not a reduction in services. Also, you'll note that the Bayfront CRA is at 0 due to that interlocal agreement expiring in May of 2024. But we're going to keep it on the books because there's still some activity taking place within that until it does eventually fall off. But we'll show that history until that takes place. Okay, now just looking at your general fund revenues, this is where you're going to see the property tax budget of 52% of it. Nothing else is close, which is why millage and taxable value drive service capacity more than anything else. You'll note that intergovernmental is 12% of that, and that piece is still waiting on the state. Utility taxes is 10%, franchise fees and charges for services are 7 each. And I want to point out that the fund balance line, 3% of 4.45 million is designated carry forward. So that's not using fund balance to balance the budget. That's just projects and existing items that are rolling forward that we're going to be using to continue. Last year's budget used roughly 13.6 million. But again, we're getting to that point where not trying to go to fund balance to balance the budget. So another data dense table here for everyone. Just line by line, the general fund is stable. Property tax is up 5.3%. Franchise fees are up 6.7%. Utility taxes and charges for services are both up modestly. The declines are sales and fuel taxes, intergovernmental and transfers. Transfers being the big one, down from 4.8 million to under $1 million, because those were one-time interfund supports that don't necessarily recur. Bottom line, 131.4 million in recurring revenue plus 4.45 million of designated fund balance equals the 135.8 million, which matches the proposed spending exactly for the general fund. So balancing that budget. And again, just calling out that 4.451 million in fund balance is not necessarily tied to using fund balance to balance the budget. It's essentially those projects and capital earmarked items that are going forward from FY26. So going into this is just kind of a trend chart showing you that composition breakdown from FY23, kind of a nicer way to look at it than from this data dense table. You can kind of see the growth in general fund revenue and how it's pretty modest and stable. Do want to note that you have that 13.6 million appropriation of reserves from prior year amended. They weren't actually what we actually collected. The honest comparison is FY27 against what FY26 will actually finish at. 135.8 million versus 133.4 million, or roughly a 1.8% change. So multi-year trend growth is real. So from FY24 to FY25 actuals, we're up roughly 9.8%, and we're up roughly 18% since FY24. That's taxable value recovering. We first passed our pre-2008 peak in FY23, so recovering from that 2008 crash. It kind of illustrates how long it takes to recover from those economic impacts. One forward-looking note is that new construction, as I mentioned earlier, fell 11% this year. So we just kind of expect that growth to moderate, and that will kind of impact what future revenue does look like. Okay. So now we're going to get into general fund expenditures by department. Again, this is a data-dense table, but really to show you that general fund spending is 135.8, matches our revenues, and it's down roughly 9.9%. Police and fire, public safety are 76.7 million of that, or roughly about 56%, and both are fully staffed with every negotiated increase funded. So recreation is down 39.5%. I want to be straightforward about why. As mentioned earlier, this budget includes a closure to the Palm Bay Aquatic Center for FY27 and eliminates the AUE staffing contract in that, which impacts recreation. One labeled to clarify is general government at 20 million. Isn't a department, it's your transfers and non-departmental costs, things that don't necessarily belong to one department or another. It's kind of city-wide or general fund-wide. And that kind of tells you how tight this budget is in terms of getting it optimized to where we really, really wanted to get it as close to that really straight balance where there's no use in dependency on fund balance. We did receive over 181 general fund requests totaling $31 million, and we didn't fund any. So this doesn't show any capital with that. And as mentioned earlier, you'll see that there was a lot of deferred items. We received many, many, many requests, but of course, we're limited on what capacity we can actually accomplish, and that's where in future amendments, we can go and look at funding capital needs based on what is determined most necessary at the time. So this table here breaks it down by type. This is probably one of the most important slides in the section. You'll note that 70% of the general fund is made up of personnel expenditures, and it grew roughly 3.4% because we funded negotiated increases, 5% for general employees. There was 8% for IAFF, 4 to 7% across FOP units, 3 plus 2 for NAGE. On top of that, mandatory police and fire pension contributions are 15.3 or up 39%. So that's a massive amount of that budget is at the public safety pensions. This is the single largest cost pressure in the budget. We paid for it all by cutting capital, 68%, unfunding positions where necessary and where feasible, and then essentially bringing that from 14.7 million down to 4.7 million. Okay, now we get into your enterprise and internal service funds. And this is where the other bulk majority of that revenue and expenditures come from. These are funds that pay for themselves, so utilities is at 162.7 million, 2/3 of this picture, and no property tax dollars support it, so all ratepayer based. Solid waste is at 19.6 million, stormwater at 15.1 million, and I'll note this slide does show that we're at 15 million, solid waste 19.6, and then the remaining other is that 40.4. That's going to be your fleet risk and health insurance fund, so not necessarily your typical like utility fund ratepayers. These are your internal service funds. So the utility story this year is capital, 55.6 million in new funded requests, 47.6 of it is capital work. And then there were 2 large projects that are not included in this budget, a 52.1 million plant rehabilitation and a 62.4 million treatment facility expansion. Those are pending bond requests, and each would have to come back to you all to approve at a later council session. Okay, and going into those expenditures, again, you're just going to see this breakdown by the funds. Utilities operating is at 85.3 million, utilities capital 77.4 million, and combined that's around $93 million in capital investments in the water and wastewater system, the largest single commitment in this entire budget. The big projects are your septic to sewer conversion at 5 million, a field operations building at 5 million, lift station rehabilitation at 4 million, and sewer system improvements at 3.5 million. Solid waste is almost entirely operating because the collection is actually contracted out and it's covering its cost. So 20.5 million in revenue against 19.6 million in expense.
So now we're going to get into our department level review of the proposed budget, but first I want to talk about our theme for this year. So our focus has been around budget for a fiscally fit future, and the fiscal fitness has really, from kickoff, been our focus for this year. And it's not just about how many cuts can we make and how fast can we make them. It's about building a budget that has a financially stable future. Because, and the example I gave in the icebreaker we did with departments this year was, we asked each department to build their workout. We gave everybody the same amount of energy to burn, and they could pick the different activities to build their workout. The goal was to burn the most calories, but in a sustainable way. So we built in where there was a bonus if you picked different activities that had a balanced workout. It wasn't all strength, it wasn't all cardio, it was agility, strength, cardio. There was a nice balance. And the goal of that was to show that it's not just always about doing the most and the fastest, it's about building a budget that we can keep sustainable for the future. And that is what we started our whole budget development this year for, and what we've carried through at each level. So really, when you go through and you see these department snapshots, it doesn't always tell the full picture, because we get the question of, well, this department increased, or this department has a decrease, or it looks like it stayed the same. But in reality, all of our operating costs have gone up year to year. Every department, even with their operating maximum, had to make cuts from the get-go, because their cost rose, but the budget that they got for it, or the allocations, didn't change. So there was that first level of cut. So some of the cuts that you see today are on top of other cuts that they've already had to make operationally. We always start with our personnel snapshot. So across all funds, our total for personnel this year is $131.4 million. It is a 3% increase over the FY26 amended. The general fund is the largest portion of 73%, which pays for all of the salaries for police, fire, and our general fund departments. The utilities operating fund has about 14%, and they do have 24/7 operations for water, wastewater crews, and critical always-on services. Building comes in at 3%, stormwater at about 4%, and our fleet and grant funds are about 1.5%. We have some internal service funds like health insurance benefits and risk that are 4% together. This is just a breakdown showing you all of the different amounts. So the 73% for general fund comes out to about $95.8 million. So how does that general fund break down? Predominantly, it is public safety. 40% is police, 31% is fire. So 71% of the general fund personnel costs are public safety related. Public works, our infrastructure staffing, it comes in about 8%. And then our other core services run a little bit leaner. Parks and facilities is at 6%. IT is at about 3.3 million, and growth management is about 2.7 million. And those are each about 3%. All of the other departments as a whole come up to about a total of 9%. And this shows you the monetary breakdown of each of those percentages. Our non-departmental, at the bottom, I do want to highlight that. It is a small position or amount for labor distribution. So we do have some services that go across general fund to some of our other enterprise services. So we do have that as a set-aside built in. So going into our department summaries, we're going to start off with the police department. For FY27, their proposed total department budget is $42.8 million. That is across all of the funds. They have two funding sources for FY27, primarily the general fund, where all of their expenditures for personnel and operating are housed. And then they also have just under $1.8 million in the community investment fund. These are their ongoing projects. They've had some grant projects in the work, not only for hardening at their headquarters here, but also for improvements out at the range. Their largest portion of their budget is 91% of it is personnel. For the fire department in FY27, their across all funds budget is $35.7 million. All of that is predominantly the general fund. They do have a very minor $2,000 budget in their donation fund for next year, and they utilize that for funding towards some of their trainings. Again, their biggest expenditure is personnel at 84%. For public works, across all of their funds, and they do have quite a few, their total for FY27 is $69.5 million. A big portion of this is going to be your stormwater utility at $15 million and their solid waste fund at $19.5 million. I will add a caveat, and on the next slide we talk about it a little bit. You'll see a slight increase to the solid waste fund because this year we are moving in 3 personnel. So there's going to start see personnel expenditures out of that fund. So some of the items that are included for Public Works this year is they do have some budget requests that were approved. We have a work order management system that is being added into their fund. We also had a salary adjustment for the city engineer in order to make the position more competitive and get it actually filled and help with some of the traffic needs. We did build in additional salary, retirement, and taxes. They also have a stormwater utility portion for the work order system and an IT infrastructure upgrade that's also been built into the budget. They did see some budget reductions. They have been closely monitoring their FP&L electrical services. We've been able to pull back some money from that allocation this year, and we look to do it again next year, about $289,000. And then they also have some temporary personnel reductions to about $262,000. One of the biggest changes we had this year is moving some of their operating expenses for the traffic ops division out of the general fund into the LOGT fund. We're trying to align the use of that fund with the actual operating use and reduce the impact to the general fund. So they had about $1.7 million of operating expenses that we were able to take off of the burden of the general fund and move to the LOGT fund. You also have the transfer of the personnel to the solid waste fund that I talked about. And I do want to add a caveat for the stormwater utility fund. So as of right now, the IT infrastructure upgrade and work order management system are the only budget request items that we've added in for stormwater. As they work on their audit and tell us what the fund balance availability is, we do have pending capital outlay items that might also be added in for the budget, and they do have ongoing operating programs for stormwater maintenance to about $1.5 million that you may see come forward in the final proposed budget. For our IT department, it's just under $8 million for FY27. They are fully funded in the general fund. They do handle all of our citywide cybersecurity initiatives, and right now they have no budget reductions on there. But we do want to add a note that with all of the temporary unfunding of personnel, we do expect to see a budget savings in IT next year, because as those positions remain unfilled, we have cell phone savings, we have software savings from the licenses that those positions would normally hold. So we do hope to see a budgetary savings on the IT side. They've also been very proactive in working on rebates with some of our vendors and providers to where we hope to see some of those savings come through for that department. For parks and facilities, their total budget for next year is $12.6 million. This includes adding some funding in for the work order management system, their portion of it. And then it also does carry a reduction of $134,000 related to the closure of the aquatic center. And then they also have some positions slated for temporary unfunding to about the $200,000. The Growth Management Department has a big change for this year with the Housing Division coming into it, so that's where you see some of the changes. A biggest portion of that and the change is the introduction of contributions. Part of what Housing does is some of their aid to other programs, so that is a new expenditure line item you'll see under Growth Management, and that's about 17% of their budget. Operating is just under $3.4 million and 44%, and then their personnel is about 39% or $3 million. They now cross 3 different funds, so there is a general fund portion that's about $3 million. The nuisance fund is $271,000, and then our grant funds for housing are just under $4.5 million. The finance department has a total budget next year of $2.1 million. It is predominantly our 98% personnel. We carry a $52,000 operating budget, and overall, there's no other changes or reductions right now for that department. For FY27, we have the legislative department. It's about $1.1 million, fully funded out of the general fund. Now, I will say that the department made voluntary cuts to their operating maximum, meaning they reduced their operating charges by about $39,000 for next year. And they also have a position slated for temporary unfunding, which would be just under $69,000. City Manager's Office has a total budget next year of $1.75 million. It is fully funded out of the general fund, and it does have temporary unfunding of a total of 4 positions that total just under $450,000. Overall, it still has about a 69% personnel budget and 31% operating budget. For procurement, their budget overall next year is just under $750,000. They do have a one-time approval of $31,000 to continue the outside consulting services. Due to their limited staffing right now, they've employed an outside agency to help with some of our larger solicitations. We do expect that to go beyond September 30th, so we are building in a budget for next year to continue those. They have one position slated for temporary unfunding for next year for a total of $107,000. Human Resources has a total budget next year across all of its funds at 27.5%. The largest portion of that is the Employee Health Insurance Fund, and it did see an increase for this year because of rises in insurance claims. And then they also had an increase due to employee payouts for the sick and vacation payouts. Overall, their general fund portion of $1.2 million did have a reduction due to the temporary unfunding of a position for FY '27. Economic Development Department has a budget next year of $962,000. And a large part of their move out was the housing division, so they now only have one fund. They don't have across any other funds at this time. And they do have a temporary unfunding of a few positions for a total of $358,000. The Recreation Department next year has a budget of $1.8 million. It is all general fund funded. For the closure of the pool, we have some varying numbers, but we do know on the operating side and for part-time wages, it's a reduction of $95,000. For AUE staffing, it's a full reduction is $663,000. And then we have additional positions that are slated for unfunding for next year to the tune of about $309,000. Overall, personnel is 78% of their budget and operating is 22%. The city attorney's office has a total budget next year of $8.7 million. A large portion of that, the majority of it is in the risk management fund, about $8.1 million. The general fund has about $548,000. The biggest portion of it is their operating. The personnel only accounts for about $22 million. Our building department has a total budget of $6.9 million for next year. It's fully funded within its enterprise fund. And it has one budget adjustment for next year, which is a minor upgrade for the IT infrastructure upgrade. Most of it is 65% personnel and 35% operating. And last but not least is our utilities department. Overall, across all of its funds for FY '27, it has a $162.7 million budget. The biggest portion of it is going to be all of their capital projects, about 57%. 15% is their day-to-day operating funds, and 11% are their personnel funds. Big highlights for the utilities funds include $93.1 million in capital outlay projects, and they have $24.9 million in operating additional items that were added for ongoing maintenance programs that they carry, training, and replacement of all of their equipment. So now we're going to get into our taxable values and millage rates. Shane highlighted this a little bit earlier, but we are conservative in our state revenues. We start with a budgeted at a 5% reduction, and around mid-August, we get the actual numbers and we true up at that time. Overall, the 10-year history of the taxable values. So as you can see, our current year gross taxable value has continued to increase year to year. That increase is getting a little bit slower as we go on. There was about a 7% increase from last year to this year. And as mentioned, our new taxable value has actually dropped or decreased by 11.3%. So this is our comparison of our revenue, in comparison with our adopted rate, our 3% cap rate, and our rollback rate. As you can see for FY '27, our proposed rate is our rollback rate of 6.6015. So this is just to highlight the different millage rates that we had this year. We are at rollback, which is the proposed. For our '27 revenue, it's about $70.5 million. It's an increase of 5.4%. Now, we did add in, down below, we had some statutory changes. Every year moving forward, the state has said we will start at rollback as our starting point. So to go above rollback automatically requires a 2/3 vote. If we stay at rollback or below, it's three out of 5 votes, just the regular majority. So this is the comparison. the tax bill millage rate impacts. So we've done the breakdown from property valuation starting at 25,000 on up to show what the estimated tax cost would be for each of the homeowners and the annual revenue that we would see. So starting at a property valuation of about 25,000 based off the rollback rate, you would expect to see an annual cost of $165.04. On up to a $350,000 house, you would go up to about $2,310.53. In comparison, your annual cost change is between the current proposed of 6.7 and the rollback goes from $2.46 to up to $34.47. And then we also did some of our higher value homes. This would range from a $400,000 property evaluation would be about $2,640.60 up to $49,5113. And the annual cost variance would be $39.40 to $73.88. On the debt millage rate, we have a change in the millage rate from last year, which was 0.9993 to 0.9385. This difference results in a savings on the debt millage side. So if you have a valuation of $50,000, you went from a tax bill of $49.97 to $46.93. So about a savings of $3.04. On up to a $400,000 tax bill, it was $399.72 last year. This year it'll be $375.40, a variance of $24.32. So we take an example of a home here in Palm Bay, and this is the historical view of the home to show the impact of the Save Our Homes and what percentage is actually paid towards Palm Bay. So this is an example of a house based off their 2025 information. You can see that the market value went down. The impact of our Save Our Homes was about $159,400. Their assessed value started at $87,670, and then they had tax exemptions of $50,722. So when all is said and done, they had a taxable value of $36,948. Based off of our current rate that for 2025 taxable value, which was FY26, it was $247.55. So of their total tax bill for 2025, between the regular millage rate for the city and the debt bond, $284.47 went to the city of Palm Bay. That was 34.3% of their tax bill. The largest portion of their tax bill, 47.6%, went to the school district. 16.3% went to Brevard County, and 1.8% was for special districts. We've updated our dollar, because we know everybody likes to see the dollar split. We do have some changes from last year. The police department is back as the largest portion of the dollar bill at 30 cents on the dollar. Fire is at 26 cents. Our debts and transfers and debt service account for 8% on the 8 cents on the dollar. And Public Works is 7 cents on the dollar. IT, Parks and Facilities, and our non-departmental are about 6 cents on the dollar. Growth Management and Finance are about 2 cents. Legislative, the City Manager, Procurement, HR, Economic Development, and Recreation are a penny. And the City Attorney's Office is less than 1 cent on the dollar. So overall, we've gone through all of our budget workshops. We've presented the proposed budget. Our first public hearing for the budget will be on September 9th. We will do our Florida Today publication on September 18th and hold our second hearing on September 23rd. Our 30-day deadline from budget adoption will be October 23rd, so you will see our FY26 cleanup of the budget adoption in those first 2 meetings. Do you have any questions?
At this time, I think the first one to buzz in quite early was Councilman Johnson. Do you have any questions?
I can wait because I have a
directly?
lot, so
Or is it questions or is it more discussions?
both.
Okay, can we just handle the
okay.
questions
All right.
right now?
All right. So this one, I'll start with, this may go to our city manager, Mr. Morton. Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. Thank you, sir, for the presentation. You mentioned $500,000 in uncollected stormwater fees. Have you, are we in the early phases of looking at ideas of how to recover that? Because our residents are doing their due diligence and paying those stormwater fees while we have others who aren't. So are we just kind of in the beginning phases of exploring or?
So that 500 was just one transfer. I think the total deficit that year of uncollectible revenue was about $1.5 million, which is significant. And we are more than in the discussion phases. It's an issue we identified 6 or 7 months ago and have been putting strategies. So currently what we're doing now, we can only do it on an annual cycle, is if you're unpaid, we've moved to a code magistrate and a lien scenario just to stop losing revenue. Ideally, in a perfect world, and I'm not a policymaker, but I will tell you, it should be back as part of your, in my opinion, as part of your annual ad valorem for everyone. And then it's, to your point, everyone's paying. They're already paying. Let's make sure those few, that's significant money, are paying their fair share portion, as well as some large landowners in the community that don't pay at all. And so it needs to be a team effort, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I know we mentioned it a few meetings ago in regards to ERP. Long-term, do we see cost savings in regards to the implementation of ERP?
I think eventually we'll find some efficiencies. I think the real value in the ERP is going to be in the transparency. Again, it's part of the reason we struggle with some of these numbers is it's very hard to track. We're very hard to build over the years. We're getting a nod from the guy who spends all day on the computer and is an expert, truly, and one of the best experts I've ever met. And so, being able to account, like with the new P card switch where we can literally see bills current instead of waiting 6 months, we can tell you what people are spending on a weekly basis, monthly basis, be able to track, be able to audit. I think this is just my philosophical perspective, and I apologize in advance, but I think any efficiency you are ever sold in terms of technology generally never pans out to be a savings, because what I've always found in my life experience is we reallocate those resources towards additional personnel or licensing to support that technology change. So I don't see a huge cost savings, but I do see some cost, but mainly efficiency and transparency and accountability is going to be much easier for everyone, you, the public, everybody to see, and that is a huge win.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Speaking of personnel, to the discussion Deputy Mayor Jaffe brought up in regards to officers and SROs, you crunched the numbers, and to fully fit an officer, was it around 100,000 or from?
I'd have to refresh that, but I think we're closer to 150 or 170 for year
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Because you've got some year one purchases, you've got a vehicle, right? Then you have the five or whatever your life cycle. We've got some training, we've got FTO time, so I think the number's higher. We can refresh it. I don't recall the exact number.
Okay, so estimated 150 to 170. The reason why I ask, Cocoa has shifted their dispatch to Brevard County Sheriff's Office, so I think that'll be worth to have a discussion with them to see how things are going and if they're happy with the process. But when you're talking about 2.5 to 4 million, that's anywhere from 30, potentially 35 officers that we can get on the road. So that's why I asked that question, sir. I think I have two more, and then I'm good. Let's see. Deputy Mayor Jaffe brought up health insurance, and speaking with School Board Member Matt Susan, I see the number in regards to 21 million, and I'm also thinking back to how Cigna and Health First were having this feud all the way up until the last minute in regards to negotiations, and just the uncertainty of that. I didn't know if there's been a discussion since in regards to health insurance or just exploring other options. So that's either for you or Deputy Mayor Jaffe. I remember we talked about it about a month or two ago. So that's the next question. Has there been any further discussion in that area or not yet?
So it's a need, it's an opportunity. I have not engaged any formal studies or analysis.
Okay.
I think this year in the gap, I just found out this morning, and HR Director, Ms. Clausen, can correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll likely see an increase in the employee share premium again for some healthcare to cover some of the rise in that cost. That's the percentage break will demand that. But I think ultimately, it has been discussed by you, Councilman Johnson, Deputy Mayor, about investigating if we can, change the inputs to get a better output on healthcare. That's something I'm hoping to dig into this year. I've sort of set the topic of the audits, but we can, and fund savings, but it's definitely something we need to be looking at.
Yes, sir. Two more questions, Mayor. I like that you brought up finance and procurement in regards to working together. I remember a year ago, you found that in change orders was about $500,000 that we could work towards working better in regards to procurement. So my question, and this is more so for us just thinking moving forward for you, Mr. Gragan, while we have him, potentially how much could be saved through our procurement process with more competitive bids, better communications between departments, and utilizing design build or CMAR when beneficial. Because even with our enterprise funds, even with our enterprise departments such as utilities, we've seen what happened in regards to, we had to go a different route in regards to getting the plant operational, but thank goodness we were blessed with Cathcart. But when you look at the millions that were lost prior, I don't know what could have been done to have, prevented that. But in regards to moving forward, what could we do to make sure every purchase is as competitive as possible? In 2030, we have, the waste sanitation contract up for bid. Last time there was only 2 bidders, so even conversations like that of how we can just squeeze every dollar we can in regards to being competitive, so.
Yeah, Mr. Gragan may want to answer if he wants, but, I think one of the tremendous values among many values that Mr. Gragan has brought with his wealth of experience is, I think we understand the mechanic side. We're making better decisions. We're being more accountable. Mr. Gragan really has impressed on us is it's a client relationship as well, and the city is a customer as much as it is a client. And so we need to have a strong presence with our potential customers to attract bidders. We need to prove that we are worth doing business with, that we're consistent and reliable. In fact, Mr. Gragan inspired me so much, and so did somebody else here, that I personally drove up and met a vendor last Friday and delivered a check that should have been delivered months ago for $660,000 and apologized and said this is not the reputation the city of Palm Bay is ever striving to give off. We want to be reliable, consistent partners. And when we have that partnership, like Cathcart extended to us, even through some trials and tribulations, there's the other whole side of it that we need to be pressing into that we've gotten better service, more reliable service, better value for our dollar, more competitiveness. So I think we've got the structural savings side that we'll continue to deliver through the different bidding strategies, opening our bidding, the bidder education that we continue to do. David has left us sort of a high-level playbook. Mr. Gragan's left us a high-level playbook of things to look at, and also managing that customer relationship. I will say we're struggling with some recruitments right now. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the state of Florida, but I also believe Mr. Gragan's leveraged his network extensively for this opportunity. I think he believes in the city of Palm Bay and thinks we're on the cusp of being a model government for the state. Long story short, I think we have 35 or somewhere in that number of qualified applicants that have applied for the CPO position. And I think Mr. Gragan's identified 7 or 8, you guys can correct me, but there's some high-level, amazing caliber individuals. So I think it proves out that approach, that relationship, that reputation matters to people, not just to the vendors and to our employees, to prospective people we do business with, to employers bringing in additional, folks into town, that these relationships matter. So I think holistically, that's how we're going to approach procurement this year.
Yes, sir, thank you. Last question. Going back to a conversation that we had on the dais, where Deputy Mayor Jaffe brought up utilities. And when we look at communities like Port St. Lucie, the reason why they're able to get a lot more commercial, even though they're a GDC community just like us, is they had the water and the sewer. They had mandatory water and sewer years before us, so they're able to get things accomplished before us. With utilities, have you seen where if cities were to sell their utilities, I know it was a no in regards to the discussion, but just asking the question to you, have you seen that when cities have sold their utilities to a private company, that they were able to quickly and efficiently get those main lines underneath and get things moving? Because the reason why I'm asking that is so that way we can have more pad-ready development projects and more commercial in that sense.
I've got a 2-part answer to that question. So my knowledge of that is not completely exhaustive, to be very honest. So in my recollection of the last time I did research is not that long ago. Only somewhere in the neighborhood, if I'm remembering correctly, and please verify, but it was 10 to 15 cities or organizations in America in the last decade or decade and a half have sold their public utility, and I think 3 of those, maybe 4, we're trying to get them back. I've contracted extensively in my career with Veolia North America, American Water, different service providers for utilities, It's like a lot of these contracts, your first year is your cheapest, you lose a lot of rate control, operational control. The costs remain the same for them, but on top of provision of service, they're trying to eke out a profit for shareholders who probably reside in Portugal, or, we worked with an energy company and their bulk of their board is overseas, so we're sending our tax dollars overseas, just things to think about. But what I will say is really encouraging is, under Gabriel's leadership and his commitment to developing time and talent, we've definitely had some foibles, right, that I think we've seen a lot of positive traction. Wastewater plant delivery was stellar, but they just completed a water main extension. I want to say this very clearly, and Gabriel, if I get a figure wrong, please jump up and say you got it wrong, but we bid it for the Pace water main extension, the 12-inch main, I believe, with 2 or 3 fire hydrants. We did that project in-house competently, competitively, timely, and at almost a 70% cost savings from the lowest bid. And that project is now live and active. So he has been building competence, he has been building professionalism, he has been building capability into the utilities department. And so right there, we've talked about this grant that we all thought we were going to get. I had high hopes. We were told wonderful things. At some point, we're going to pull that trigger and come back and say, the external bid was $3 or $4 million. We believe we can do it for 60 to 70% less. We'd like permission to go ahead and move those utilities into the compound for economic development. So I think we're building some advantages that we should be very proud of in our utilities department into the system.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, and thank you, Gabriel.
And, I'm compelled to just let you know, there are similarities with Port St. Lucie, re-emphasizing that we were both general development corporations founded, but I think it stops there. If you track what they did infrastructure-wise, where the folks were able to make payments on that infrastructure, that I think that they were never with a 3% cap. So there's definitely a lot of variables that they were able to overcome. They had those tools available. Does that conclude your questions? I'll start, Councilman Langevin, are there any questions other than discussions you want to get into from staff? Okay.
I have a question for Matt.
Yes, sir, carry on. Oh, okay. I didn't see you left. I didn't see you left. I didn't see. Okay, so you want me to hold off?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah, for Mr. Morton, I do. I mean, I have one now for the city attorney's office. I know, litigation has been a thing that's been growing, and since I've been on council, a lot of it seems frivolous, but doesn't mean you still don't have to defend a lawsuit, whether it's frivolous or not. But my question is, we have several positions that are filled. Do they need to be filled? Can we capture those monies back to the general fund, or instead of filling those positions, can that money be used for outside law firms? I know you're using that money currently now for outside law firms, but instead of filling those positions that aren't filled with permanent full-time employees, can that money be captured back into the general fund, or you can answer that?
Yes, I will tell you, essentially, the model that we built started back when I first started in 2011. It is much more expensive to outsource these to outside counsel than it is to do it in-house, which is why actually I was hired, because we needed to bring in cases and have the litigation capabilities. We have 2 positions as far as attorney positions, one of which I have not filled. The other, yes, I desperately need to fill it. I have, we just did interviews. I had a few several candidates. I've got in the works the HR, but if we don't have that person in-house, we will spend significantly more having to outsource it. Anything that we do with outside counsel, even with me being able to negotiate with some of them to get government rates, it's just very expensive to have outside counsel.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, I understand, if I was to convert how many hours you work a week over a course of a year and what we would have to pay an outside counsel would be 4 times the amount in outside legal fees. So I just didn't know if the unfilled positions, the one in particular said that isn't filled and it won't be filled, that's money that could be allocated somewhere else, or, you prefer to retain.
Well, it's not budgeted. Essentially what I asked for is just not to lose my FTE. you know, the employee position. But if, as far as the only one that I am not filling is the